Tonight's on deck with Evil Dead Chick. What's in store when you open the door? Step inside, my little ones. Bring your flashlight and good luck charms. Oh, and good luck charms. Oh. Might get dark. It might get scary. Maybe even a little insane. Crawl out from under the bed. Don't be afraid. Evil Dead Chick is here to entertain and thrill. Tonight's on deck with Evil Dead Chick. Let's hang out till the sun comes up.
What do you think this is all about? You think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life.
I eat beetles for breakfast. My clothes reek with the scent of death and decay. My shower cleanses me with blood. My shampoo oozes with slime. My bed sheets hiss with the venom of 1,000 serpents. It's a way of life. Every waking moment is a macabre walk in Mr. Monroe's neighborhood. I want to wear black t-shirts every day. Horror fandom, it's a way of life. Horror fandom.
Hey, gang, and welcome to the first episode of Horror Fandom, A Way of Life. Chris is going to be joining me here shortly, and we're going to be talking all things horror conventions tonight. And we're each going to share our stories, and we hope that some of you guys and gals, if y'all want to participate in the chat and talk about why you still love horror conventions even after the many, many years of changes, the expense related to them. You could go into debt going to horror conventions. But we're going to talk about, despite all of those things, why do we still go? Why do we still love these horror conventions? Why do we keep going back year after year after year and time after time after time? And we're going to get to that here soon. But as always, I like to get a little housekeeping stuff out of the way first. And I am representing Lethal Ladies Inc. Me and Candace's collective entity that we're at some point going to use to sell products at conventions. But I just want to let you know that tomorrow night should be another cannon fodder. And Thursday should be another They're All Messed Up, which actually I think it could be. I can't remember which ones I've rescheduled. It might be a rescheduled one, may not be. But I did have to reschedule Celluloid Trash that was supposed to take place last night. However, I had some dental work done, which wasn't too bad, but I had taken an anxiety pill before I went, because the dentist I went to before the dentist I'm going to now just basically tortured me. So I had a little, anxiety. Well, I had a whole lot of anxiety. And so by the time I got home, I was pretty sleepy. And I sat down to try to watch Bloodsuckers from Outer Space, which was supposed to be one of the movies I was covering last night. And I fell asleep. And when I woke up, it was after 8 o'clock. And I was like, oh, crap. So I hurriedly got on the computer and rescheduled it for next week. We may have a Friday Foolish because my schedule has changed, and I'm not going to have to work a late Friday this Friday. Yay me! Because out of the blue, somebody wanted to swap with me, and I'm like, yeah, sure. I didn't want to work this late Friday anyway. So I've got to, get back with Candace on that, and we'll see how the land lays with that. And let's see what else we got going on. No watch alongs this weekend. But you may have noticed that I already have Evil Dead Chick Slasher Fest up for the first Friday in August. It's going to be bad movie night on Evil Dead Chick Slasher Fest. And I see Chris just popped in here. I'm going to add him in just a second after I talk y'all's ears off. But it's going to be bad movie night the first Friday in August. And it's going to be, the movies are going to be Drive-In Massacre and Blood Cult. These films ain't good, folks, but they're entertaining. And that's what makes them, so bad they're good. And that's why I chose them for the next Evil Dead Chick Slasher Fest. Yeah, I think that is all the stuff that's coming up. I want to remind you to make sure you hop on over to deaditesondeck.com, my horror shop. Tell them Poe sent you. Poe is the official mascot of the Deadites on Deck horror shop. And I've got t-shirts, I've got hats, I've got mouse pads, I've got tote bags, got blended teas, candles, Booga Booga Bears. The Pyro plushies are still coming, folks. And Poe is going to be the first of those Pyro plushies to be on the shop site. Now, if you're not a horror fan, or you are a horror fan and you say, gee, Dana, I visited your site, but all your designs suck. No, I know y'all wouldn't say that to me, to my face at least. But if you don't see a design you like, hey, there's a custom form on the homepage of the shop site, and you can fill that out. Tell me what it is your heart so desires, and I'll make it a reality for you as long as it's legal, folks. We're not going to put pornography on shirts or anything like that. I'll leave that to the professionals. But I'm trying to make a joke there. That's my poor attempts at humor here. But anyway, if you want your kids, your grandkids, your pets, you and your significant other on your latest vacation, just let me know what it is, and I'll be glad to see if we can come to an agreement on what it is you want and the price and all that good stuff. And since this is a live stream, Movie Roulette is in full effect. And how can you play Movie Roulette? Well, all you got to do is give a $5 or more super chat. And if you do that, you can pick any movie of your choosing. It can even be a movie I said I absolutely hated in the past. Perhaps I'll like it this time. But for me to watch and review on an upcoming episode of Movie Roulette. And now I feel like I've talked enough about extra stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and add Chris here before we lose everybody that we got. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Dana. How's it going?
Good. I survived my dental appointment yesterday.
Oh, well, that's good. That's always good to
They didn't kill me. Yeah.
And you survived that. I tell you, the last time I went to the dentist, I was having a really bad toothache, and and I went there, and all they did was just like did an X-ray on me, and it's like, well, buddy, we got you an appointment set up in about 3 months from now. And I'm like,
Right. It's like, what in the heck?
what? I was like, and I was like, buddy, you can't do anything for me right now. I mean, like, I'm dying of pain here. And it's like,
Right.
I was like, well, we could just suggest you to get, this product or this product to kind of, numb the pain for a while. I'm like, all right, whatever, so, but
Yeah, Candace was telling me about that, and she was like, they don't want to do anything here in Hazard. She says they always want to just send you to Lexington or something like that.
yeah, there's that. They just want to like send me to Lexington and just and get like I may have to something about I had to have may have had surgery, but let me tell you something. I don't know what it was, but like literally like just a few days after that appointment, my tooth stopped hurting, and it's not hurt ever since. And that's been like 3 months ago or something.
Well, that's good. I hope it, doesn't come back or anything.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but it was. I was like, well, whatever. I'm not in pain now.
Well, that's a good thing because if Chris was in that much pain, he probably wouldn't be able to be on here with me for this or for he wouldn't be he would probably be out of commission.
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing my own strings or anything. I mean, I don't know. I'd probably just be laying on the ground somewhere crying or something.
Well, I don't. I can officially say because I've had toothache pain that it's bad stuff. And I remember when I was a kid, my mom had terrible trouble with her teeth. In fact, she had dentures put in when she was in her 30s. So that's pretty early to be having, dentures put in. But my mom's teeth just literally just started falling out of her mouth. She was in this restaurant called the Country Boy. It was one of our local restaurants, hamburgers and French fries and stuff like that. And she said all she did was bit into a burger, and there a tooth fell out.
Oh gosh.
So anyway, she always told me that toothache pain was the worst pain there was. It was worse than having a baby. I know you guys don't know what having a baby's like, but my mom had 2 kids, and for her to say that toothache pain was worse than having 2 babies, it's got to be pretty bad. So, anyways, we'll quit talking about teeth, or we'll drive everybody away because they don't want to think about toothache pain. Um, but um, I'm excited about this new series of streams that I'm going to be doing, and I'm excited to have Chris on here with me for this first one because I feel like with both me and Chris, horror conventions are something that's near and dear to our hearts. Would that be a good assumption, Chris, for me to
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so. I mean, it definitely means a lot to me because um, I've always, even before I got into horror conventions, just with any kind of like community that I was a part of, that I felt like, there were so many other people within that community that liked the same things I did. We had the same mindsets, the same kind of ideas, and we agree on a lot of things. And I could use like the whole local music scene here in southeastern Kentucky as an example. So that was something I was heavily involved in for years, dating back to around like 2000, 2001. And then around like 2007, I started putting together my own shows, promoting, my own music shows, and, asking these bands and to come play, and just, arranging the venue, and just, I was doing all that on my own. And I just had so much support from all the other people that were coming from those shows, and coming out to just not just my shows but other people's shows in the area. It just felt like that was a huge part of my life. And then when I discovered horror conventions, it was the same thing. Like I was finding a whole new group of friends, and just finding these people that I could really relate with in this type of fandom. And it just, for what is it, 16 years now that I've been going to horror conventions and making more and more friends all the time within that community. Yeah, it's a huge part of my life, and it's really important to me.
And Chris brought up a very good thing, that you get a whole it's like you get a whole new set of friends, not like the friends that you had in high school or even elementary school. This is for me when I started going to conventions and started hanging out with some of the same people I still hang out with, not all of them, but some of them I still hang out with. I really felt like I belonged. I in my small hometown, and Chris may be able to uh, see this too because we're both from kind of small areas,
Mhm.
and my little bitty small town. And I've said this before. When you would say that love these horror movies and loved everything about them and just couldn't get enough of them, people would look at me like I put my clothes on sideways that morning. It was just like, really? And then I had other people when I started working for the library in my little bitty hometown, people would say, "But Dana, you're so nice and sweet." Like in horror movies was only for deviants or something, or
Yeah.
evil people. And I was like, well, yeah, I am a nice person, but I also like horror movies. So I always felt like an outsider in my little bitty hometown. But whenever I started going to horror conventions, it opened things up because there were people from all over. I wasn't just dealing with people in my itty bitty small town anymore. I was dealing with people from all different places, all walks of life, um, different states. In some cases, you could even meet people from different countries that would actually come to the States for these conventions. So I felt a sense of belonging. I felt a sense of friendship, camaraderie, all that stuff that I had never felt before. Um, and Chris, you seemed like you were going to say something. I didn't want to.
Oh no, no, you're good. I was just going to say that and I could completely relate on that too. Now, I mean, I had felt that same kind of camaraderie, and like I said, in the local music community and just other little groups of stuff that I was a part of, before I got into horror conventions. Um, but they've all been kind of like very different with each one. You know what I mean? Like I felt that camaraderie in the local music scene or whatever else I was a part of, but I have never felt, I don't think, more welcomed and more like a part of a community than I have the horror community and the convention community. Because I've just, I've really met a lot of like-minded people like yourself and just, made so many friends in the process these past 16 years. And it's really inspired me to to even branch out and talk about these things that I love on YouTube. I know I've started kind of late. I mean, I just started this year, compared to a lot of people who's been doing this for years and years. um but but still, it's just, that's why it's important to me. That's why it's something that I love and I continue to love, because I've just felt like I've just been a part of something for so long. I mean, I've been a horror fan ever since I was a little kid. But, and I've had friends, in the area, especially when I was in school and in the high school and all that. I had a large group of friends who loved horror. And definitely, that what you were talking about, how there's people in your area who would look at you like, you had to be some kind of deviant or an evil person to love horror movies. Now, like, I seen both sides. 'Cause I said a lot of friends, I said, that would love the same kind of stuff. We would, talk about horror movies. We'd watch them together. But then there was this, people in my area who would look at you like, that's evil. You're going to hell for watching those, and being obsessed with those or whatever. And I just know so many people that in this area that hate absolutely hate. Don't even necessarily look at it like that, like that they're evil, that you're going to hell, but they just hate them because they just they. I don't know if they're scared or what it is, or they just look at us like they're or disgusting or something. I don't know, but but that's everyone's right to not like something as much as it is for them to like something.
Mhm.
And but I've definitely been in those situations where people would kind of judge me for you know not just wearing horror movie shirts, where it could be like metal shirts or punk band shirts or anything that was like, I guess, what people around here would consider out of the ordinary, you
Right.
know. So I definitely know where you're coming from on that. But it is what it is.
And even, I'm not saying this is this way with Chris and Candace because I think, or I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Chris, but with Chris and Candace, I feel like while they may not be on the same page 100% of the time with all the horror movies and all the horror conventions, I think they're pretty dang close. The thing that's happened with me and Steve is that Steve has grown out, I guess is the way you would say, grown out of the horror conventions. And he just doesn't see the necessity of going to every damn horror convention that comes along. And Steve is also, I mean, and I don't think he would deny it. I think he's embarrassed sometimes by me wanting to wear horror shirts so much. I think he even told me one time, you should save those horror shirts for conventions, not wear them every single day. And I'm like, well, I bought these dang things. I'm gonna wear them. I like them,
Well, that's pretty much my wardrobe. Is is horror movie shirts and wrestling shirts or and there's other movie shirts that I got too, and whatever video game shirts. Like I have several Resident Evil shirts, which is
Mhm.
and Resident Evil. Well, it's a video game. It's horror, and
Oh, yeah.
it's and they're definitely influenced by a lot of zombie horror films like the Romero films and all that. So, but yeah, I mean, I have probably more horror shirts than anything else in my wardrobe. Um, so I can't agree with Steve there. Sorry, but I mean, and I'm wearing my horror hound shirt tonight
Yeah, I like that one. I
because
like
we are talking about conventions, so I figured I would put that on. But yeah, I don't know. I can't agree with you that on that, Steve. I mean, I'm like I've told Dana in the past here on her channel, like every day is Halloween to me, and
Mhm.
if I could have all that stuff, horror stuff, decorated inside my entire house, I
Yeah.
would do it, you know. But
Another
that's one of those things that me and Candace don't necessarily agree.
that's another thing that Steve will not I guess I should say will not allow. And some people are going, I don't want y'all to think bad of Steve, okay? But he will not, even back when we were dating and then early in our marriage, he said, um, you're not putting that in the living room. That's not staying in the living room. Like I used to take some of my like when Scream Factory would have those figures
Hmm.
that you could get, the driller killer and the miner from My Bloody Valentine, all that stuff, the Silent Night, Deadly Night
Right.
ones, and all that. I would set them when I got them in. I wanted to be able to look at them in the living room because where are we most of the time? If we're watching TV or something, we're in our living room, right? Or our den. Some people have dens and stuff like that. And so I wanted to look at it. And he said, well, you can keep it out for a little while. And then he would say, don't you think it's time to put that in the back room? And so, I mean, and he told me too, and Candace may remember me and her, this was early on. We went walking around a convention one time, and I can't remember if it was Horror Hound or it was one of the others. but I've never seen these ladies there at a convention ever again, and I wish I could. But they had the wax dip teddy bears that were horror related, and they were scented, and I think they wanted like $50 for them, and I really wanted to get one. And I said, Steve, I'm thinking about getting one of those wax dip teddy bears. And he said, well, you're not putting it in the living room. I'm not having that horror related stuff in the living room. And so I didn't end up getting one, and now I wish I had.
Uh,
Let's see. The poet says, I got into horror movies from Friday the 13th. Now, you know, I hate to mention the words gateway drug because people probably have all kinds of bad connotations with that. But I think everybody that's a horror fan had a movie that was their gateway drug into horror films.
mhm.
And I think, I had stuff early on, like Halloween and Friday the 13th. But I think what cemented me into a bona fide horror fan was The Evil Dead. I think
Mm.
that was actually my gateway drug into, just complete horror fandom. I loved horror movies, but I don't want to say obsessed, but it was kind of an obsession after a certain point that you got to watch just about every horror movie that comes out or that you come across or whatever. I mean, do you feel like that, Chris? That there was a certain movie that was like your gateway drug?
Yeah, there was, and I actually talked about that on a stream I did a few weeks ago, where I covered the Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchises. So those were my two. Like those movies were the both the Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Street films. I'm not sure which one I seen first out of from those franchises, but I know they were both from around the same time that I was first exposed to horror films, and that was partly thanks to my dad and my brother. And if you've seen, if you have me on Facebook, you see my profile picture. It's the same one that's on my YouTube channel. That's a picture of me from 1989. I was 3 years old. I'm dressed in one of the old Ben Cooper type costumes of Freddy Krueger, because that was something that was always known in my house growing up, was the Friday 13th movies and the Nightmare on Elm Street films. And back in the 90s, because I grew up mainly in the 90s, they were always showing like the Friday the 13th marathons when it would be on actual Friday the 13th. Same thing with the Halloween movies. On Halloween, they would show like the what was it, Monster Fest, I think, on AMC.
Yeah,
And they would show them. They would show like the Universal Monster movies. And that was another big thing. Like me growing up was the
yeah,
Universal Monster movies, because that's something my dad, he loves horror films like me. I got into them, because of him, pretty much. But like his favorites were always the Universal Monster movies and all the black and white horror films. They still are to this day for him. And but he still liked the more modern stuff too, like the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and so forth. But yeah, so Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Street films, those were like my gateway into horror.
yeah,
But it's really, it kind of all blends together for me. Like I said, because my dad was huge into it, so he was always watching the horror film. So I never, when I was I was that little, I never knew what was going to be next, what I was going to be watching next,
mhm.
because he just kind of got a kick out of wanting to scare me all the time by showing me these movies.
Right.
But it backfired on him, because I it became a lifelong obsession, pretty
Now,
much.
now you just absolutely love them.
Yeah.
Um, Phil, I did not see that. He said, "Did you see Bruce Dickerson and Geezer Butler are going to be at Horror Hound?" I don't
Oh,
know.
I
If
think it means Bruce Dickinson. So yeah, he's the singer from Iron Maiden. Yeah, they've had him announced there for a while.
I probably
And
just didn't
a-
pay
and
attention. mention as I should have.
Candace and her brother actually got to meet Geezer Butler several years ago at a Louder Than Life music festival in Louisville. And I missed out on that, unfortunately, because I was watching a band called Sum 41 at the time.
Mhm.
And they went by like this like tent or whatever, and he was doing a signing, and I think Candace bought like a bandana of his band that was there that weekend called Deadland Ritual,
Mhm.
and he signed it. So I think she got to meet him for like $10 or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And he's probably going to be like 100 at Horror
Yeah,
Hound.
yeah,
Uh,
it's unheard of to get somebody's autograph or meet somebody for $10 now.
yeah, but it's funny that Phil brings it up about Bruce Dickinson too, because he's like of all the music guests that they've announced so far for this upcoming Horror Hound, uh, Bruce Dickinson is the one that I would be excited to meet the most, because Iron Maiden is probably my second favorite metal band of all time. But I did see probably about an hour and a half ago, someone posted on that Fans of Horrorhound group on Facebook, um, that they were down to like 3 photo ops left with Bruce Dickinson. So I don't know if I'm even going to get to meet him at this show, because he's going to be there on Friday only, and Friday is a 5 hour window, for that for Horror Hound on Friday. So I would imagine he'll spend like an hour doing photo ops, and probably the rest of the time doing autographs, because there's already a huge appeal for him being there. I know there's going to be a lot of people coming, and I've talked to Nathan from Horror Hound, and he said there's people that are coming from out of the country and everything just for Bruce Dickinson, because this is his first ever convention appearance. Um, and I don't see them doing more than 2 sessions, because they're already on that second session of the photo ops, and like I said, they're getting ready to sell out. I don't see him doing any more than that. If he does, I'll be surprised, and hopefully I can get in on that session 3, because like I said, I've not bought my photo op or anything yet for that, but if they do open up another session, because like I just not had the funds here lately, to be able to get that or any other photo ops for any guests or anything like that. Because that's mainly what I like to do nowadays at conventions is photo ops more than I do the autographs, because it's very quick, and you don't have to wait a really long time for it. Now I still like autographs and stuff. If I could just go like straight, not wait very long, or I can go straight up to a guest if I want their autograph, I'm cool with that. But I'm not going to be waiting an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever, for somebody in line to get their autograph. I'll just say screw it and get a photo op.
Yeah.
But yeah, but if it doesn't happen, hopefully he does another show, and I'll be able to meet him at another show. But I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens.
Phil put it on in the chat, and I put it up on the screen. He said 125 each.
They are, and then if you add in the fees and everything that they charge on top of that, I think it's $144 for the photo op with him, which like I said, I'm okay with that. I know that's a lot of money. Some people say that you're crazy for paying that, but I absolutely love Iron Maiden. Like I said, they're my second favorite metal band of all time, and I mean I've loved them for ever since I was a teenager when I first heard them, and I never thought I would get that opportunity, because that's kind of a new thing with conventions. Like I which I guess music guests have been doing conventions for a while here and there. Like I've seen Gene Simmons do conventions, and other members of Kiss, because me and Candace got to meet Ace Frehley from Kiss back in 2011 at Days of the Dead in Indianapolis. But it's becoming a more and more kind of frequent thing now with the conventions, that more and more of these musical guests who've never done shows before are starting to do them. Like Dee Snider's done for a while, and he's going to be at that Horror Hound coming up too. But I believe this is both Geezer Butler's and Bruce Dickinson's first convention appearance. And Geezer Butler, being part of the legendary Black Sabbath, being there too is huge. But Bruce Dickinson, yeah, I would love to beat him, because I'm just such a huge fan, and like I said, yeah, it is a lot of money, but I don't really care. It's it's important to me. You know,
Right.
that's all.
Yeah. And if that is all that matters, if it's important to you and you're not letting your family go hungry, which I know Chris would never let his family go
Oh,
hungry or deny 'em medical care or anything like that. I just don't see why people, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, how people get their panties in a bunch over the money thing, but we'll talk about that in just a little bit here. But I wanted to say hey to Gory Tiger and hey to Batman. They're in here with us. We actually got 8 people in here right now, so I knew if I had Chris on here with me, some more people would come because they don't want to hear me just get on here and talk. It's more fun.
that's not
But,
true, Dana.
well, it's probably kind of stale when it's just me. And I love having you or Candace, or I even told Candace she could come on if she wanted to, but I know Candace hasn't been feeling real well.
She hasn't.
Um, so, um, something I wanted to bring up is if you could say there's one thing above all else, Chris, that keeps you coming back time after time after time, even though, like I said at the beginning of this, that the landscape of conventions is kind of changed a little bit. Like, and I think Chris would agree with me. Some of our friends that started out going to these things don't go to them at all or
Hmm.
don't go to very many of them anymore. And so some of that core group is missing. And the prices are severely inflated for almost everything
Hmm.
and almost everybody that you either want to meet or get a photo op with. Um, there are rare instances where you might get lucky and somebody may say, oh, it's $20, $25, but it is extremely rare, extremely rare,
Yeah. There.
almost zero that you will get that. Most of the time, you're talking about people wanting 50 or more dollars, 50 plus dollars, just to scribble their name on a picture or whatever, and you get to shake their hand and talk to them for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, the only person I can think of still that does conventions and has been doing them for God, probably decades now. Um, that is actually still free for their autograph is Lloyd Kaufman from Trauma.
Hmm.
Um, I know that as long as you buy anything as cheap as $5 from the Trauma table, he
Mhm.
will sign that for free, and he will sign whatever else you brought with you. So I mean, I highly respect that.
Yeah.
That's extremely rare nowadays, and that's free is as cheap as you can get.
Yeah, and Steve says free 99.
Yeah.
That's what Steve likes to say. But I think the cheapest I got most in the last few years was I think I paid $25 for Felissa Rose's autograph, and she signed my um, Sleepaway Camp Blu-ray, and I didn't even ask. She just said, "Hey, pick a picture off my table, and I'll sign it for you,
Yeah.
uh, and no extra charge." And she let me take a picture with her. So, I mean, I thought that was a great deal.
Well, Felissa Rose is one of those what you call unicorns in the horror convention community
Yes,
because she is more probably the nicest celebrity that you'll meet at these conventions, or if not the nicest one, definitely up there as one of them. Um, I mean, definitely, I've never seen someone, and personally for me, I've never seen someone that was so genuine with
Yeah.
their fans, with every single person
Oh,
showed
yeah.
such enthusiasm. There's been people like that I have experienced, but I think Felissa Rose is probably the nicest. Doug Jones is another one of those people.
Mhm.
Doug Jones is extremely enthusiastic with his fans, very genuine. He gives hugs to every single fan, and just is very up close and personal. It's not one of those things like, all right, let me sign your stuff. Whatever, have a good day.
Right.
And it just feels rushed. It doesn't feel real. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
There's really no like it. There's times where I have met celebrities where it was so rushed. It did not feel personal at all. It didn't feel like they even cared what I was saying to them, or what they were signing for me or anything. Um, but there's very rare occasions like Felissa Rose, like Doug Jones, people like that. Even another one of the nicest people I've ever met at a convention was Roddy Piper. Definitely the nicest wrestler that I've ever met. Just you know, there's those are there's few and far between, but it's very rare that you get that that kind of experience. But when it does, it feels special to you, and it
Yeah.
make
And
it
you
it
don't
make
forget it either.
and it makes you feel like you want more. You want to experience that again, and I think that's one of the reasons why I keep going to conventions, because
Mhm.
I'm chasing. I'm always chasing
Right.
that feeling of getting that experience of people that I'm a fan of, and these movies that are a part of that I have such passion for. And people say don't meet your heroes, and in some cases I would agree with that,
Right.
but you never know what you're going to get until you actually do it.
Mhm.
And that's why I love these conventions. Like I have went met people or wanted to meet people before and felt like, all right, I can't wait to meet this person. This is going to be an awesome experience. I wait to tell them how I feel about them and their career and the movies they're part of. And then I just kind of get let down. Like I've talked about that here in the past on your channel about Zach Galligan. Gremlins is my favorite
Yeah.
movie, but I didn't have the greatest experiences with him. But then again, there's those times where you have absolutely over the top great experiences, and I've had more of those than I've had bad experiences.
Right.
And that's just that's one of the biggest reasons why I keep going to these, and just because of just that passion that I've had since I was a kid, that loving these horror movies, and just not just horror, just movies in general, and just and other these and wrestling and other types of guests that I meet at these shows.
Mhm.
I just, video games too. Like I just at the one of the last shows I went to, I met some of the guys who were a part of the original Mortal Kombat game back in the 90s. So that was super cool. I never thought I would get to meet people like that, a part of a video game that I loved as a kid. And just, that's one of the biggest reasons why I still do this.
Now, it's interesting that Batman brought up. He said he watched another good Dean Cameron movie this past week called Ski School, and while Chris was talking, that reminded me of when I met Dean Cameron and Gary Riley, who were both in summer school,
Right.
Chainsaw and Dave, and I was just so excited to meet them, but I did not realize I was going to have as great of an experience with both of them as I did. Dean Cameron was one of the sweetest guys ever. And when he posed in the picture with me, he was like leaning his head over, like he was leaning his head over on my shoulder. And he was just really sweet and nice and appreciative, seemed appreciative of all his fans. And then Gary Riley was kind of like the topper. I just met Dean Cameron, then I went over next the next table over to Gary Riley, and Gary Riley was just like, I did not expect this. He was like, "Is this your husband?" and was, motioning towards Steve. He said, "Y'all just look like y'all are soulmates, like y'all are made for each other." I'm like, I usually guests don't start talking about you and your spouse, or you and your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. But he did. He was very extremely personable, and he talked to me for quite a while. And those were some of those experiences for me, at least, like Chris was talking about. You chase after those
Yep.
experiences over and over again. Lauren Marie Taylor was somebody else that I met a few years ago, and she was just as sweet and nice as could be. And Candace says, "Give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire." Um, but Laura Marie Taylor was just like I would imagine a lot of people came up to her and talked to her about Friday the 13th Part 2. But
Hmm.
instead of talking about that movie, I talked to her about Girls' Night Out. And I
Mm.
already knew, but I let her tell me this story and show me her husband's picture anyway, because it was just a cool experience. Whenever I start talking about Girls' Night Out, I said I loved him Friday 13th Part 2, but I also loved him Girls' Night Out. And she's like, "Oh, wow." She said, "Did you know my husband was in that movie with me?" And she showed me a picture of her husband. She says, "There we are," was showing me, and I just kind of, because it was such a special experience for me, I
Mhm.
didn't want to say, "Hey, I already knew that." I just let her do that because she got out.
Right, yeah, because it if and I've done that same thing, Dana. Like I've had I've met people and they start telling me things about the movie, behind the scenes or whatever it is like that, and I just go along with it, even though if I already know it, I just go along with it because, you don't want to say, "Well, I already knew that," so and it just kind of makes you, well, for one, it makes you seem like you're like a know-it-all, and
Yeah,
two, it would kind of feel like that you were tainting the experience with them
right, exactly.
because they're sharing something special with you as a fan, and you may not possibly know that, even though you do already, if it may be something you already know, but they're sharing something, so it just kind of like builds that conversation between you two, and kind of builds that personal experience and makes it even better and better. That's the way I feel about it.
Right,
And I've been in situations like that before, like and it's funny that Tom, he mentioned John. He regretted not meeting John
right,
Saxon in the comment. So that's an example I can use. Like John Saxon. When I met him, I only met him that one time, but it's just I can't remember. I think it was like 2011 or something like that. But so like most people I think were coming to meet him for Nightmare on Elm Street, or Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, or but the thing that I got signed by him was an 8x10 from his role in Black Christmas because I absolutely love Black Christmas. I think it's one
me
of the
too.
greatest slasher movies of all time. Definitely one of the top Christmas related horror films. So he was really like, enthusiastic about that. And
Right.
that I was there to meet him for Black Christmas because I guess he probably the rest of the time he was there, people was like getting Nightmare on Elm Street, talking to him about Nightmare on Elm Street stuff, but over and over. But like he was like he felt like this was like a breath of fresh air. Oh, I could talk about something different now. And so he started like talking about all these things about Black Christmas, and of course, it was already stuff that I knew because I absolutely love the movie. I've studied the movie over and over, but just to see how enthusiastic that he was telling me these stories from the film and stuff during the making of it, and just stuff with like stuff behind the scenes with Margot Kidder, like little funny things she would do on set and stuff. Uh, that felt awesome to me that that he was taking that time to share that kind of stuff with me.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely get what you're saying there, and that's why I didn't just kind of interject and say, well, I already knew all that, I knew that and that, and because it would just I think would have really tainted that experience, and he would have been like, oh, okay, or something, and just and kind of I didn't want him to get like a weird look on his face or
Right.
you know what I mean.
Exactly.
And then he's like, "Well, this kid knows it all, don't he?" Well, I'm wasting my time telling him this stuff.
Yeah.
So, but like it was a absolutely great experience with him, and I hate that so many people, especially people that are kind of like the newer generations of going to conventions and stuff that missed out on getting to meet him because he passed away, and just so many others like Roddy Piper that I've
Yeah.
met, and just other guests that have passed away. It it really sucks for and I feel bad for those people that just got into conventions, in the past few years, or got into the genre and are really kind of becoming a part of that community, like we talked about earlier. I just feel like that they miss the good old days, what we consider the good old days.
Right. And they've missed out on, well, Wes Craven for one is one that I wish had come to a convention that I had been able to go to, but we've lost many of the greats in the horror field. Wes Craven's gone, Toby Hooper's gone. I
Mhm.
mean, the big guys, you know, John Carpenter's only, I think he's one of the last of the heavy hitters. I mean, I would almost put Sam Raimi in there because I love Sam Raimi so much. But, when I think of horror and when I really start getting into it, I think of John Carpenter. I think of Wes Craven. I think of Sean Cunningham, Toby Hooper.
Yeah.
I mean, Sean Cunningham's still alive too.
Yeah, he's still doing shows too. They
And I met him. I got to meet him, and I
I,
met John Carpenter as
I
well.
got to throw Joe Dante in there too. I
Joe
think
Dante's another good one. Yeah,
he's another, and Don Coscarelli as well.
Don. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's so many of them, but then I think we've lost a big chunk of them
Mm.
too. And you know, not just the directors, but we've lost people that acted in these movies. Gunnar Hansen, I wish to goodness I'd went up and met that man. Marilyn Burns. We've lost a lot of people from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Same with the Friday the 13th films as well. Steve Dash, Richard Brooker, and Ted White have all passed
Yeah.
away now, and recently Laura Park Lincoln from Friday
Yes.
the 13th Part 7, she passed away, and I think she's the very first final girl out of all the Friday the 13th films that has passed away.
I believe you're right on that, Chris. I was going to read through some of these. I don't want to miss anybody. Um, Now, Tom says I love book signings and they're for free. Well, I have not found any book signing that's for free. Have you,
I haven't
Chris?
either. No,
Oh, he must
I
be
mean,
lucky.
well, the book signings I've been to, like, if he might mean it in a different way. What I'm thinking is like, so every book signing I've went to, you have to pay for the book, and then they'll sign it, for free after so you're just paying the price of the book, and
Right.
then they'll sign whatever else you got too. The book, like that was the Mick Foley book sign that me and Cass went to in West Virginia. It was like that. We had to buy his new book. He was there to talk about his new book. He was there to you buy it, and he would sign it, and then he would sign whatever else you had for free.
Right.
But as far as like getting everything, the whole experience for free, I've never gotten that. I've never just had somebody say, "Oh, here's you a book, it's free." Then let them go sign it.
Yeah, somebody's going
I've
to
always,
want.
I've always had to pay something,
Yeah. Yeah. But in general, I mean, they're not, usually they don't charge you to come in a Barnes and Noble or something like that, or wherever they're going to be doing the signing. Borders, Barnes and Noble, whatever the place may be. Sometimes libraries get people to come and do book signings. I always wanted my local library in my small town to get Bruce Campbell when Bruce Campbell was writing his books, but they were like, "No, that's too much money," because he was charging quite a hefty price, but that was for his plane ticket to come there and to go back, and hotel rooms and all that stuff. They have to build all that in there. Now, am I saying that thousands of dollars is what they would need. No, probably not. But they want to get something out of it. They're not going to come and do this for, I don't know anybody that would do it for free. I don't think Stephen King would do something for free. He came to Louisville a few years back, and I bet he got something.
I
For,
think it depends on who it is, and their kind of their proverbial like place on the totem pole. You know what I mean
right.
of their status, the popular status. Because I have known of people who were doing book tours and stuff that they do make the appearances for free, but they are they're paid whatever the sponsor or the promotion of their book, and the sales of their book goes to them and so
Right.
forth. But it's not like anybody that's like super popular and thing. The bigger the name you are, yeah, they're probably going to require. But like Stephen King, I'm sure that he had an appearance fee, on top of that signing, Um, but I've not done honestly, I've not done a whole lot of book signings.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I've bought signed books, like done pre-orders and stuff online where I've not
Right.
actually had to go to an event. Like Rob Halford, the singer for Judas Priest, Barnes and Nobles did like a pre-order for his last book, and then they were all signed by him, so I got it that way. The Never Sleep Again, Nightmare on Elm Street book that came out years ago.
Mm-hmm.
When they did the pre-orders on that, one of the bonus things on that were if you did the first stage of the pre-orders, the books came signed by Robert Englund, Heather Langenkamp, and Amanda Wise, and Tommy Hudson, who did the book.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I have that, and then I've added other people from the film in that as well. I wish I think John Saxon had already passed away the time that book came out, so I wasn't able to add him to it. But I know Ronnie Blakely, who plays the mom in the original film. She's going to be at Scarefest this year in Lexington, so I'm going to try to add her to that. If there's anybody else, that I don't already have in the book, I'd like to, add them in there as well. Um, but yeah, like I don't do a whole lot of signed books anyway. I mean, like I have some, but like I mostly, when it comes to like, signings, I either like do like posters or
Mhm.
action figures or something like that that I think is really cool. Not to say that books aren't cool, because I think books are cool too, but I like something that's displayed where you can see the signature easily, not like one of those things where because you have to open up the book and see that it's signed and stuff. So I can't really display that very well to where you can, because that wouldn't look too good if I had like a book, that was signed on the inside and I just had it like opened up on my shelf, and you could
Right.
and you couldn't see the cover of the book. So I mean,
Right.
but if
Exactly.
you like that too, that's cool too. But that's not anything I'm gonna do.
um, Batman says there might be someone who still hasn't popped their con cherry. I'm sure there's a lot of people that haven't.
Well, I think he means himself too. I think
Mhm.
he's talking about he's never done it. I don't think is that right, Batman? You said you've never done a convention before. I think he said that once before here on
Yes,
the
it seems
channel.
like yeah. Um, and Candace said, "Ha ha ha!" I was hoping Dana would say it. Hey guys, tuning in late. Um, Tom says he loved John Saxon and Blood Beach. I
Mm,
haven't seen Blood Beach for a long time.
I've never seen it. I've never seen that
You
movie.
never seen Blood Beach?
No.
It's not the best film in the world, but I mean, it's a fun one though, from what I can
Maybe
remember.
that's one I need to watch soon. I've watched several movies here lately that I had never seen before. Um, think one I talked about you last time when I was on here, where I was talking about the movie Born on the 4th of July with Tom Cruise. I hadn't that was the first time watch for me. And then this past week on my channel, I did like a Shark Week type thing, and so I watched those. They're newer movies. The first one came out in 2018, The Meg, and then The Meg 2 came out a couple years ago. That was the first time watch for me. I love those, by the way. And then I also watched another one called Cruel Jaws, which is the Jaws ripoff. It steals all the footage from like the first two Jaws movies, and there's a couple other, like I think one called Deep Blood and The Last Shark, the footage from those movies that it steals from. I had fun with it. I thought I was really entertained by Cruel Jaws. I mean, it's like one of those so bad it's good movies, you know.
Right, exactly. Batman says, "Yep, exactly, Chris. I've never been to a con and don't know if I'll be able to go to one either." Which never say never, Batman.
Yeah, never say never.
I used to back in the day. I would have never dreamed that I would have went to the amount of conventions that I have gone to, or met as many people as I've met. When I think back on it, like I think I told the story of when I met Sam Raimi at that Lexington Comic Con. Like sometimes, and I think Chris can probably attest to this too, it did not hit me that I met one of the biggest heroes of my horror loving life when I met Sam Raimi. I had been waiting to meet that man forever. And it hit me when me and Steve got in the vehicle to go back home. I said, I just met Sam Raimi. And I know my eyes glazed over and all that stuff. And Steve was looking at me like, yeah, you did, Dana Ann. But it just hit me that I met the guy that directed my favorite horror film of all time, The Evil Dead. Like, and it was just, those few minutes for me was a lifetime.
Hmm.
And do you feel that way, Chris, when certain people that you've met, like it doesn't hit you when you're there in front of them, but like a little bit later, maybe later in the convention, or maybe it is on the way home that it hits you?
I have on several different occasions. One of the I think it was the first time that me and Candace ever met Robert England.
Mm,
Uh, Even though we just did a photo op with him, like it was just very surreal for both of us. We're like, we just met Freddy Krueger. Like we just met, you know, like a legend.
yeah.
And it's been like that in several situations. Like for one personally for me was Kevin Smith. I'm a huge Kevin Smith fan. And when we got to meet him last year, again, it was just during a photo op. It was him, Jason Mewes, and Jason Lee in the photo op as well. And they were just all so nice, especially Kevin Smith. He was so cool. He was just giving everybody hugs and just, thank you for coming. And, this at the time, even though like those photo ops go very, very quick. I mean, they're very brief. We got to talk with them a little bit, especially Kevin. And, at that time, his mother was in really bad health. And, I mentioned that to him, and he was so thankful for me even, mention that to him, because I said, I hope your mother's doing well. And he said, so far, so good. He said, thank you so much for asking. And he was just very, very kind. And that just meant so much to me, because I had been a fan of his work for so long. Um, and just for him to just to be kind to me, and especially during a time that he was going through a hard situation with his mother,
Right.
it just, and then after the fact, me and Candace couldn't stop talking about how nice he was and how cool it was. And it was just kind of like, it wasn't until maybe like an hour afterwards. I think we and her were getting ready to go out to eat. And I was like, holy shit, I just met Kevin Smith. And I was like, I've been waiting on that for years. And and the thing is, like with conventions in general, I've known about them for so long. Because I remember years ago in the '90s finding a tape called Fangoria's Weekend of Horrors, which
Mhm.
was hosted by Elvira. And I remember watching that, and I was thinking, I think that convention was like in Chicago or somewhere out west. And I was thinking that's all conventions were they were out west, like these big cities, these big, really huge known cities,
Yeah, that they would never come
like
close to
like
us.
Los Angeles, and I would see that, and then would read these magazines, like Wizard magazine, because they would have promote the San Diego Comic Con out in California and all these different conventions. I was so aware of them for years, but I never thought that I'll never get to go to anything like that, because I mean they're not going to anything come close. But and it wasn't until like 2008, 2009. I had friends that said, because 2008 was the first year that they did Scarefest in Lexington, but I didn't know about it. I still didn't know about anything about conventions that were in my area at that time until a year later. In early 2009, I had a friend tell me, "Hey, there's this convention in around Cleveland called Cinema
Oh,
Wasteland."
yep.
And he's like, they're having a 35th anniversary reunion of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and all these other. So that was my first convention, and I was like, oh wow! I was like, there's actually going to be a convention, around here, close to us, semi close to us. He's like, well, there was, Scarefest was in Lexington. I was like, what? I didn't even hear about it. I was like, who all was at that one? And he was like, well, they had a bunch of Friday the 13th people, Betsy Palmer. Who I was like, oh my god, my mind was blown. I was like, how did I miss this? How did I know about this? And there was other ones at the time going. I just didn't know about, like Friday Night Film Fest was going on, before that time too. I started going, and I was like, how did I not know these? Know about these? But
I think I ran into the same thing, Chris, because I went to Cinema Wasteland was probably my first official
mhm,
convention going experience, but I didn't know anybody then. I didn't know the people I know now. I didn't know Steve. I didn't know all my friends that I know now, but I decided to go, and my brother and my sister-in-law went too, because they basically weren't interested as much in the convention as they were staying in a hotel and getting to
mhm,
swim in the hotel pool. But they went to the convention with me, and so that was the year all the Last House on the Left baddies were there.
mhm,
So I
okay.
met David Hess, and
Do you know what year that was? What year did you say it was?
I think it was 2004.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then, but I was in the same boat as Chris in a way, because I was like, how did I not know about these other ones? How did
Yeah.
I not know about Fright Night Film Fest? How did I not know about Scarefest? And that just opened up a whole new world for me. I'm like, Fright Night Film Fest is in Louisville. That's not that far away from me. Scarefest is in Lexington. That's not too far away from me either. It's like, how did I not know? And I think I can credit Dead Pit for
Mhm.
making me realize that there were conventions that were closer to me than I realized. Because when I started listening to the Dead Pit show, um, they talked about, oh yeah, we're going to Fright Night Film Fest, and
Yeah.
we're going to Scarefest or whatever, and we're going to have a table set up. And of course, they probably laugh about this now, but I was starstruck even by them, because I was like, here's some, I hope they don't get offended by me saying this, but here's some country boys, they're from like a area like I'm from, like a, not a very large area. And when I started listening to Dead Pit, it was like, these guys are a lot like me. And so whenever they started talking about going to horror conventions and stuff, I was like, well, you don't have to ask me twice.
Yeah.
I'll be there. I want to meet these guys. I want to talk horror movies with these guys. Plus, I want to meet some of these, actors and actresses and directors and stuff like that. But Wes would probably laugh now, but the main reason I even went to Fright Night Film Fest was to meet him and uh, Aaron, or CK and Uncle Bill, as a lot of people know him. That's why I went, was so I could meet and talk to them. Um,
Um, I can kind of relate to that in a way too. Like, so, like I said, when I first found out about conventions, it was through a friend who was lived around where I lived, and right around that same time, before I went to my first convention, it was at the I had another friend, which Justin
mm,
Owens, who used to go to
yeah,
conventions and it was always hanging out with me and stuff. He he was the one that introduced me to Dead Pit. So right around that same time, I found out who they were, and then short before I started going to conventions, and just finding out that they just lived 30 minutes down the road from
mm,
me was also cool because, like, I was like, yeah, they're like me. They're from the same area. They like the same kind of stuff. So that was what drew me to their show, and just ended up becoming friends with those guys. Um, but just hearing them talk more about the conventions and stuff like Fright Night Film Fest, Scare Fest, their first experience when they went to that horror find,
yeah,
and like I forget where it was at, but it's like, and I think it was like maybe 2004, 2005 when they went to that. And
mhm,
that's where they met George Romero and all these other people. It was like it was their first experience with conventions. So by them talking about that, and talking about the other shows that was local to the area, right around the same time when I was getting ready to go to my first convention that's in Wasteland, Ohio, that's what really kind of piqued my interest. What to look more into this world,
mhm,
this community is of these conventions, and that's when I started trying to find. Like, I became obsessed. I'm not gonna lie, I became obsessed. I started trying to find every convention that I could find that was at least just maybe a couple hours, within where I lived. So I was not only going to just horror conventions, I was going to comic conventions and gaming conventions. And if there was people at those that I wanted to meet, then I would take time to meet them.
yep,
Ari Lehman, the first time I ever met him was not even at a horror convention. It was at a convention in Knoxville, Tennessee called Adventure Con, which is not around anymore. But I went to several of those adventure cons, and they always had a mixture of like horror and just pop culture and video games and anime and all kinds of different types of guests at those shows. And that's like if you look at Fright Night Film Fest in Louisville, they started out just as a horror convention, but they would end up developing into Fandom Fest, which
right.
was kind of the same deal. Like it had a variety of all these different guests. Um, but all these shows, I am as much as I am into horror and I am into wrestling and all that. I am a fan of so much more than just those things. I'm a fan of video games, of comic books, of cartoons, of just all kinds of things. And I've got to meet a lot of people that meant a lot to me at these shows, and I'm thankful. And it's some of my best memories by going to these conventions. Not just meeting these people, but by just making the friends and the moments that I've hung out with people, and just kind of like we've stayed close with one another, like you, Dana. Like if it weren't for going to these conventions, I would have never knew who you was. Maybe I might that might I mean there might
Probably
I
not.
might I may have possibly known who you was at some point, and you never know. But
Mhm,
but I could say that I can credit going to these conventions and meeting you and people like Wes and Aaron and T-shirt Joe and just and a lot of these vendors who I've become friends with over the years, like artists like Joe Robinson, like Nathan Thomas Milliner, just so many people. And I look forward. That's one of my things that I look forward to the most is that I live here in a small area of Hazard, Kentucky, but and I rarely get out as it is anyway. But when I do go to these conventions, if I'm seeing these people that I've become friends with, once or twice a year, you know, I look forward to those times, you know. I look forward to those times for meeting, like buying stuff that I probably don't need, and meet
I think
celebrities.
we all do that. Yeah.
But one of the biggest things for me is going to conventions is just, the people that I've become friends with. This is, I get to see them once or twice a year, and that means a lot to me. Get to
Right.
see those people. I get to see you through the internet, thankfully, with these streams and everything. But it means so much more when you get to spend time
Right.
with each other in person.
You're actually standing there face to face with somebody, and there's not a computer between
Right.
you or the internet between you or whatever. You can actually just, you know, give somebody a hug if you want to, and I
Yeah.
always hug Candace and Chris whenever I see them, because they're like my family. They're like my extended family. And Candace always says that family doesn't always have to be blood. And she's right about that. She's exactly right. But Chris bringing up Ari Lehman reminded me. I have a really short Ari Lehman story. I've never actually went up and got like Ari Lehman's autograph or anything,
Hmm.
but I think it was the first Fright Night Film Fest I went to in '09 that I was just walking down the hall in the hotel, and there was Ari Lehman. And this shows you what a nice guy he is.
He
It
is a
doesn't
nice
matter
guy.
who you are. He just threw up his hand and waved. He said, "Hey, how you doing?" And
Yeah.
I was like, I just talked to Ari Lehman in the hotel hallway.
I think that he has an incredibly good memory too,
Mhm.
because every show that I've seen him at, he's always remembered who I was. From that very first time I ever met him, we had a really awesome conversation about music at that Adventure Con that I met him at. And then maybe like a month or so later, I seen him, I think it was at Fright Night Film Fest, and he was so cool at that show. He remembered who I was, and then I paid him. I think it was like maybe at the time it was like 15 or $20 for his autograph, and then but he was so cool to just sign a bunch of other stuff that I had with me for free
Mhm.
after that first autograph. And and then I would see him several other times at shows, even when I didn't go up to meet him. Like I would go to like the after party and hang out with people, and he would be down there with everybody. And there was a time I remember I was just sitting by myself. There wasn't any, none of my friends were there hanging out with me. I guess I don't know if they weren't there that day or if they just weren't at the show entirely. Can't remember exactly what the situation was, but but he saw me sit by myself, and he was like, "Hey, man, how's it going?" And he just came up and he sit down, and we just had a conversation with me. I was
Mhm.
like, and it's one of those things where I was like, man, that's crazy. Like, this guy was in one of the biggest horror slasher movies of the early 1980s. I mean, he was in it for like 5 seconds, but still a very big important part of that film,
Yeah.
and the legacy of that franchise. So just to to think that he was taking the time just to check on how I was doing because he seen me sit by myself. I still think about that. Think how cool that was.
That's very cool. Um, so I don't want to bring our enthusiasm down, but it's a question I have to ask. Me and Chris have been talking back and forth about the things that just keep us going and keep us going back to time after time after time. So my question to Chris would be now, and I don't want we'll talk about a few other things before we get off here because I don't want to end on a bummer note. But Chris, for you, is there anything that comes to mind that would ever, outside of not having any money, but I'm talking about like an experience or something that would make you stop going to horror conventions?
Um, I don't know. That's a tough question. Um, I mean, it'd have to be something really bad that would piss me off. I'd be like, hey, I'm never going to these again. Like because a lot of people look at conventions and think, well, you know, they're expensive because, these celebrities have a really high price or their photo ops are really high or whatever. But nobody's making you go to conventions to meet these
Right.
people. I mean, you can go to these conventions and, and just meet people like you and become friends and have that's some of my favorite memories of these conventions is just going and meeting new people and becoming friends with them, or just checking out vendors that has cool stuff that I would never see anywhere else. Now, I can't speak for everybody that would be in that situation because there's probably people that live in big, fancy cities and sees this kind of cool stuff all the time.
Mhm.
But for a person like myself who lives in a very small area in southeastern Kentucky where we have nothing like that around here, no cool stuff that I can go and look at, or I always have to travel somewhere to find this cool stuff. We the biggest thing we got here is fucking Walmart. Excuse my language, but we don't have Target, we don't have any shopping malls, we don't have like any cool little collectible like stores around here. So that's why conventions mean a lot to me, is because not just the celebrities, they're part of it. Meeting people like that's cool, but just the friends you make, that are like minded like you, these cool vendors, and that's one of the things I like. But if it got to the point to where even the vendors were like, well, this is getting too much for me. I'm not making any money, and or some of my friends that I only see at these conventions, if they stop going, I don't know. That would maybe kind of like put me off and maybe not want to go to them anymore. If these vendors that I love so much will stop going, or the friends that I made there, they stop going. The pricing right now with if you do want to meet celebrities, if you do want to get photo ops with them, the pricing is not helping anything right now in the current state that that's in. I mean, I still there's certain people that I will still pay to meet and stuff, but it's very few. Like every convention I years ago when I first started going, I would meet at like almost everybody there.
Right,
I was
exactly.
I was able to afford to meet him, but now I'll be lucky if I get to meet anywhere from 2 to 5 people at a convention, and I only go to maybe like 3 or 4 conventions a year. You got to think about the convention world is very oversaturated now with shows. I mean, there's new shows popping up left and right in every state of the country. I mean, and there's probably at least 50 or more different shows per year just in the United States. Um, you know, Back when I first started going, if you look at just horror conventions alone, there were very few at the time throughout the entire country. And now there's so many, and there's even shows like Horror Hound who are doing 2 shows a year. Start next year, Scarefest is going to have 2 shows a year.
Oh,
Uh,
really? I hadn't heard that, Chris.
yeah, so there's going to have the regular Scarefest, in the fall, like in October or whatever. But they announced that they're going to be doing a second show starting next year called Spawn of Scarefest. So you got different conventions like that are doing multiple shows a year, and it's just where you got to get to that point where you have to pick and choose. Not everybody has got that kind of money to afford to go to every single convention they would like to throughout the year. So I'm at that point where I have to pick maybe between 3 or 4 or 5 shows a year, and even some people be like, well, I only go like 1 or 2 shows a year. Still, like even I go to those 5 shows, I still have to be very selective with all those. I have to be pick and choose who I want to meet the most because I know I'm not going to get to meet everybody. And Scarefest this year is a huge dilemma for me because there's a lot of people at this show this year that I want to
Oh my
meet.
god. Yeah, it is like it's fully loaded.
But
It's
I don't know how I'm gonna. I was like, it right now. I mean, it's for months now, for at least the past 2 or 3 months. I'm still trying to figure out like who am I going to be able to afford? Who do I want to meet? I mean, and then I know there's going to be people that I'm going to have to leave out that I don't want to, but and it's going to upset me, if but I just it's getting to a point to where if I go to these things, if there's a lot of people that I want to meet and I have to pick and choose, would it be better if I just don't go at all?
Mm.
And so I've been, kind of going back and forth, thinking about that kind of stuff here lately. And, I still want to go to these shows. I still want to, meet people, and get autographs and photo ops and stuff, for people I've never met before. But I have come to that conclusion. If I have met these people before, I don't really need to try and meet them again for
Right.
anything else.
Again. Yeah.
Like Monster Squad is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's my third favorite movie of all time. And, they're having a Monster Squad reunion this year at Scarefest. But for the majority of I think it's like 10 different people they got from the movie. It's going to be so I think it's like 7 or 8 people that I've already met. So I don't really need to meet them again. But, Michael Faustino is going to be there, who played Eugene in Monster Squad. So I definitely want to meet him. And, there's a couple others. But again, like, if I get those people, am I going to be able to get anybody else? And you
Right.
got
That's
people there, they're having a Friday 13th Part 8 reunion. They're having a Return of the Living Dead reunion, which I've met a lot of the Return of the Living Dead people already as well. But there's a couple there that I still haven't got to meet. So like Jewel Shepard and John Philbin. And so I may try to meet, I don't know. Like I said, but there's so many. I'm going to have to write everybody down that I want to meet. And then just kind of like, do an elimination process.
Chris
'Cause
is going to be doing March Madness, only he's going to be doing like the brackets for March
Yeah,
Madness.
that's basically what I'm gonna have to do because I'm not rich. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not rich, and I'm not making enough money to where I can live, and pay my bills and then go and meet all these people that I want to meet.
Right.
You know,
It just,
I have
it
to
just,
pick and choose, and some people I've had people tell me like, "Well, won't you just stop going all together? Just don't pay it. Just don't meet them." Like, but the thing is, I can't do that. There's a
you're
part of me that just says, "No, you know, there's something in me that says I have such a passion
hmm
for the genre and and going to these shows to meet these people that that are part of these movies that I love. It's just it's something that I want to do. I
Yeah.
mean, and not everybody's going to agree with that, and that's fine. But it's just something that I love. It's something I love to do that's within me.
Mhm.
And, even if I have to pay money to do it that, that I don't exactly want to pay, but in the end, I have done this many times too, Dana, where I have said, well, like Sam Raimi, for example. I was like,
Uh-huh.
Sam Raimi was $100 per autograph when I met him. And I was like, "Damn, that's a lot of money." I was like, but I want to finish him out on my Evil Dead poster. I want to finish him out on my Book of the Dead DVD. Um, and I all the way up to it, I was excited to meet him, but I was also dreading because I had to pay that money,
Yeah.
and I know that was a lot of money. But after the fact, I have no regrets. I absolutely have no regret paying what I did, and because I had a great experience with him, and especially the photo op that me, Candace, and Noah did with him and Ted Raimi and Ivan Raimi. It's
Yeah.
one of the best photo ops we've ever done, and just how cool it was when Noah came in and because he was dressed like Ash,
Mhm.
he had the chainsaw hand and everything, and Sam Raimi just takes him and places him right in front of him and positions his arm and everything to for the pose for the photo, and it just came out so great. I loved it, and that's people will laugh at that. I know people will laugh at that and just say like, hey, I mean, it's just a person that it's a part of a movie, and you don't even know them. They don't even know you. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's true. But there are a lot of things that that we buy um, in this world, and we put money into that. Not just like autographs or photo ops, but I'm talking about people buy video games,
Yeah.
people buy movies. I mean, we have tons of friends that buy movies, physical media, these 4Ks. That's something I've never been big into is the 4Ks, but
Mhm.
I understand and I respect why people do it. And to me, meeting these celebrities, paying the prices that that they're charging for their autographs or a photo op, to me
Mhm.
that's no different than somebody spending $70, $80 on a 4K movie. You
Yeah,
know,
and
if
it's
it makes,
not.
yeah, if it makes you happy, that's all that matters.
Mhm.
And it's nobody's business really what you spend your money on.
Right.
That's just how I feel about it.
And I was thinking about what would ultimately make me stop going to conventions. And I'm not trying to plant any seeds in any nefarious minds out there. So I hope there aren't any nefarious minds out there listening. But I think it would have to be something that was where I feared for my safety. Like, and
Well,
again,
yeah,
I don't
that's
want to put anything in anybody's mind, but I think Chris knows what I'm talking about here.
well, yeah, I've thought about that, and I'm glad you brought that up because I actually thought about that here recently.
Mhm.
Because outside of conventions and horror and all of fandom, this world is becoming crazier and crazier every year, and people are out there that are legit crazy
Oh yeah.
are can be unpredictable, and you don't never know where they're going to pop up. I mean,
Or what's going to set them off?
I
Or
mean, if you look at the theme park that's here in Kentucky, Kentucky Kingdom, I think there was a shooting there just the other day, and then there's shootings that happen, all over the place,
yeah.
and that's there's even an instance where years ago at a comic convention. Remember, a guy came in with he brought a gun and he got it inside the convention, and he was like planning to kill Jason David Frank. So and that's what kind of led a lot of these shows to implicate these like
Safety measures, I guess.
they would like the metal detectors and stuff. Now there's a lot of conventions that still don't do that, but most conventions that I know of, they actually go through those precautions now to where they check everybody at the door and stuff and make sure they don't have anything that they're not supposed to be bringing. And I know like it used to be, very easy to come to a horror convention years ago and bring a machete in and have like have
Exactly.
Kane Hodder sign or anything. But nowadays they have like precaution and safety measures for those kind of things. If you bring if you're a cosplayer and you come in with a gun, even if it's a toy gun, they still most shows now will ask you to put an orange tip on that gun to show that it's 100% fake.
Right.
But yeah, like I definitely agree with you on that. Like that is one of the things that would scare me if I had seen tomorrow that there was a convention, that there was a shooting at or something, then it would probably scare me from not going, anymore. Um, because like you said, you don't know when that stuff is going to happen, but also you can't live in fear of that kind of thing either, because
Exactly.
that could happen anywhere. You could go to Walmart tomorrow. That could happen. You could just step
Yeah.
outside your house. I mean, damn it! Look at Lou Perryman.
Yep.
Going back to my first convention I ever went to, Cinema Wasteland. He was supposed to be a guest there, but he was murdered right in his front yard the day before the convention.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just one of those things where yeah,
You're actually not safe anywhere.
you
Real.
worry about it, but that stuff could happen anywhere. And I've talked to these things about with Candace, like, cause she's afraid of flying. And and I'm still trying to talk her into getting on a plane one day and flying somewhere. But she's just afraid, and and a lot of the stuff that happened, especially you know um, 9/11, which was a long time ago now. It was over 20 years
Oh,
ago.
yeah, but I'll tell you, the first time I got on a plane with Steve and we went to Texas, I was thinking about that when
Yeah.
I was on
Yeah, but the thing is, ever since then, though, like they have taken extreme measures at airports and stuff now. And I've even heard some people say that flying is more safe than traveling on the road. And
Mhm.
honestly, that's probably true because you see more accidents on the road, people getting in car crashes and stuff, than you hear about planes, crashing or whatever.
Right.
And like I said, again, one of those things where you just got to do. If you want to do something, if you want, go for it.
Mhm.
Don't live in fear about it. You can't help what happens. You can't never predict what's going to
Right.
happen. But but I'm going to say that it would make me consider to stop going. I will say that
It definitely give
if
you
it did
pause,
happen,
I think. Yeah.
if it because like, and another thing that kind of like, and I know it's the reason why Candace is not going to Scarefest this year, um, is because they're having that Warren Museum with the exhibit with the Annabelle doll.
Mhm.
And a lot of people like will probably laugh at that too, that don't believe in that kind of stuff. But I do. Candace does. That's something, but I don't I don't want to live in fear and not go to Scarefest because it's there. Candace is not going because she has a very overly extreme fear of it, and I completely understand why she feels that way. And I tell you, I was leaning more towards how she's feeling after I heard the news today about the guy who has put this tour together. They
Mhm.
were just in Gettysburg the other day, and that guy just suddenly died. So that guy who was leading the tour, the lead investigator, the whole handler of this tour and the Annabelle doll and everything, just suddenly passes away. Now I'm not saying it's because of the doll or anything, but I'm also saying, it could be
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you
it's
don't
definitely
there's
possible.
no, his cause of death has not been revealed yet. But if you believe in those kind of things like I do, if you look at the history of you know the hauntings and just the accidents and all the thing of people getting killed surrounding that doll, if you believe in that kind of thing, then I mean it just does kind of make you wonder, and it kind of raised concern for me. It's like, if people do believe that there's something that happened with him because of his death that had to deal with that, is it safe to continue this tour and to have that museum at Scarefest later this year? I mean, I know for one, even if they do, I'm not going anywhere around that exhibit.
Yeah,
Just
I there's a lot of things that don't bother me, Chris, that have to do with horror related stuff. But I don't I don't want to mess with that stuff. And I was talking to Steve about the other day. I said, I said a lot of things don't bother me, but I said they should have never taken those things. Those things were in a controlled environment when the
mhm.
Warrens were alive. They had those suckers locked away. I don't think it's a good idea to take them around the country or whatever because those are, I don't care what you believe, to me, those are dangerous objects. And
Well,
you
you
don't
know,
need to have them around people.
a lot of people will, like I said, you'll probably laugh at this and laugh at how I feel about it, but that's fine. That's your right to believe and feel how you want to feel. It's just like it is my right to feel and believe what I want. But I don't really believe in coincidence. I believe that everything happens for a reason, and just to look at those all the history with the Annabelle doll and all the different haunted objects that dealing with the Warrens, I don't feel like those things happen to people that have died, and everything surrounding those things. I don't feel like those happen just because of spooky coincidence or anything. I feel like there's a reason for that happened, and this, but but if you don't believe in that, if no anybody out there listening don't believe in that, I respect that too. I'm not going to sit and argue with you about it. Just like I don't expect anybody to sit and argue with me about it. We can have a discussion about it, but nothing is going to make me feel any differently from
Yeah.
how I feel about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I see Melita's in here. Melita's from Greece. So
Oh,
welcome
cool.
back, Melita. She said she popped in to say hi and see what we were talking about. And Daniel's in here. And Melita says, I have a comment regarding violence. As Laurie Strode wrote in her journal when Halloween ends, the truth is evil doesn't die, it just changes shape. Which that's a very good quote. Even though I didn't like Halloween, that is a good quote, though.
Yeah, and very clever too, because
Mm,
the shape, Michael
yeah,
Myers. Yeah.
exactly. Um, so I guess me and Chris will try to get things wound up. If it's okay with Chris, I thought we'd
Yeah,
stop around 10 o'clock, about
that's
20
fine
minutes
with
from
me.
now. That will have meant we were on here a total of 2 hours, and I think that would be a good amount of time to talk about what we wanted to talk about. And then I got to come up with another topic of discussion. Maybe Chris can help me come up with a topic for the
I
next
don't
one.
know what were you thinking about.
I hadn't really I hadn't really thought of anything, here recently. And this horror fandom and horror conventions, I just kind of pulled out of my hat or whatever.
Well,
Horror
I
convention.
guess I could ask you, Dana. Do, is there any? I mean, I know we've talked about Horror Hound, Scarefest. Is there any other like conventions other than those two that's been on your radar that you were interested in here lately?
Well, I always wanted to, because I went to my first what I call horror convention back in '04, and I went to Cinema Wasteland. And
Mhm.
then I went two, maybe three times to Cinema Wasteland with Steve after we got together. And then Steve kind of, I guess Steve lost his taste for conventions. He'll go and take me, but he's not really into them anymore. But I would love, and some people might laugh because there's been a lot of chatter about Cinema Wasteland, both good and bad over the years. But I would love to go back to at least one more Cinema Wasteland, before I get too old or I die or whatever and can't go to them anymore. Um, just to see if it feels the same. Maybe to meet some different people that I haven't seen at other conventions. Um, Maybe see if my old buddies that we used to hang around with, Tim Gross and Rick Fusselman and all those guys up north. Um, if they still, hung around there and stuff. I
I
know
know Tim still does. I know, and he
he
even
still
kind of he. I think he fools with the horror realm too that they do in
does.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
And but Rick, I don't know with if he does the horror shows anymore or not. I know that he's more involved with he has his
does.
own he has his own convention now. He has a toy
Yeah,
convention,
he
uh,
sure does. And
Toy Hio.
Tim has Gross Fest
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
and that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean I always look what Sim Wasteland is doing, but like I don't know if I'll ever make that trip again just to a show like that. Like normally, if I go to a show, I'm having to travel on a long because that's like probably about 5 hours away or something. I think for
Mhm.
me, um, it has to be something I really want to go to, or I know that people's going to it that I'm friends with. I know they're going to be there.
Yeah.
Um, I've just been kind of out of that cinema wasteland loop for so long now. I don't really know anybody other than just a couple people that are there every now and then, not all, not guaranteed to be there, and just you know, like I think their next show they're doing like a Toxic Avenger reunion, and I'm not really
Yeah, I don't think
big
I'd
on
be
that.
too big on that. I feel bad that I missed a lot of the Italian people that
Yeah,
came back in the day. Some of them Steve got to meet.
yeah. I actually got to go to one where they had a Cannibal Holocaust reunion. Ruggero Deodato was there, so I got to
Oh,
meet him.
cool.
And yeah, just like the, I mean, I've only been to maybe like a handful, maybe two or three
Mm,
different Cinema Wasteland shows. Um, but for me, like I stick like the two big shows, like Scarefest and Horror Hound are the two big that are semi local to me. Um, but and I go to one that's about it's a couple hours away from here in Knoxville called FrankenCon, and they're still kind of relatively new. They just had their fourth show this year, but I've been to every single show they went to, and in the same sense, it kind of feels a lot like Cinema Wasteland. And it's a very smaller show. They have maybe about at max 10 celebrity guests at each show.
yeah.
It has that old school atmosphere about conventions that I fell in love with. And that's why I go to that show. Like I said, there's only like, and if there's anything like local, maybe like 30 minutes or an hour away. Like I just went, me and my brother-in-law, my nephew Henley, we just went to that show, Hollers and Heroes Con, that was in
Oh,
Pike,
yeah, that's right.
not long ago. So stuff like that. If it's cheap, there's maybe at least one person there that I would like to meet, and it's semi close to me, then I'm gonna go to those shows. But I know people that go to like tons of conventions every year, like throughout the year. They go to Horror Hound, they go to Scarefest, they go to like Galaxy Con, they go to Steel City Con, they go to Monster Mania, they go to Mad Monster Party, they go to Spooky Empire. There's
I
so
want
there's
to know who they're getting their paychecks from because it ain't where I'm getting
well
mine from.
one of my friends, which he's a tattoo artist, so he makes pretty good money
Yeah, I
doing
would
that.
think so.
And he doesn't have any as many responsibilities as I do. He doesn't have his bills. He's not married. He doesn't have any children.
That makes
You
a
know,
difference.
so
Yeah.
like I tell him, I'm like, man, more power to you. If you got the money to do it, go for it.
Mm. I got to ask you this, Chris, because I was thinking about another event that I would like to go to. Do you consider Living Dead Weekend to be a convention?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, and I would love to go to that one too. I wanted to go the one this last time that they
Yeah.
had, but they're doing another one inside the mall, and this next one, it's the thing is though, it's the weekend after Scarefest. So
Oh, wow.
I'm not gonna be able to do it either. But from what I understand, this is going to be the very last one inside the mall because, as we know, the mall is pretty much going to be non-existent at the beginning of next year.
Thank you, Walmart.
Um, but this is going to be the last. I think, and from what I understand, they're still going to do Living Dead Weekend. They're just going to have to find other locations for it there within that area. But this will be the last one in the mall. And funny enough, it kind of like ties in with what Scarefest is doing because Scarefest is going to have that Return of the Living Dead
Yeah.
reunion, and they're going to be doing that at Living Dead Weekend as well. So um, outside of that, I mean, they've not really announced anything else that they're going to be doing, but they usually have kind of a huge selection of guests from all of like zombie movies or Romero's movies, and so you know I would like to go to it one day. I mean, I'm probably not going to get to go to one that they're going to have at the mall, but hopefully, one day I'll get to go to it. Yeah, and I do, even though it is kind of not as big as a spectacle as like Horror Hound or Scare Fest, and from what I understand, they have like these old stores inside the mall that there was nothing in them.
Right.
It's where they have all of the different guests. But I've been to much smaller conventions than that, so yeah, I would definitely consider it a convention.
Well, I told Steve I knew what the answer would be, but I told him, I said I'd like to really go to Living Dead weekend. He's like, "No, Dana, I am not driving all that way. The only way I would go up there is if I flew." And he said, "I don't have the money for a ticket for that right now." He said, "So no." I said, "Well, this is probably going to be the last time that they're going to do the mall thing." And he looked at me like I care, because Steve is not he's not the hugest Dawn the Dead fan. He likes it all right, but he could take it or leave it. Now me, I'm the big Dawn of the Dead fan.
Hmm.
If you were to say which of y'all out of the couple are is the biggest Dawn the Dead fan, it would be me. But Steve doesn't even like Night of the Living Dead, and I love Night of the Living Dead, the original, the classic Night of the Living Dead. He's like, I don't like it, and I'm like, okay, well, whatever.
That's actually it's funny you mentioned that though, because this week on my channel is I'm doing Zombie Week.
Ah,
And so I finished out so this past week was Shark Week, and even though it's not all overall a shark movie, it features a shark. So I finished out Shark Week with Lucio Fulci's Zombie as
oh,
a
yeah,
as a
that's
as a
awesome seeing that.
as a transition into this week, which is Zombie Week, and not the original Night of the Living Dead is one of the movies I'm going to be covering. And this actually, I didn't even notice or I didn't realize till earlier. I was looking over at my channel and everything, and this will be the 50th episode this week, this Thursday, of
Wow.
my 500 movies in 2025. So, and like I said, it's Zombie Week. I'm gonna be doing like Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead. I won't be doing Dawn of the Dead this week because I done it at the beginning. That was one of the first movies I did earlier this year.
Right.
But I'm just been doing several different ones. So if anybody wants to go over and check out, my channel, and I'm doing part one of that of Zombie Week on Thursday, and then part two on Sunday, and then just got. I'm over halfway there, Dana. I'm like, I'm
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at your numbers to see where you're at,
Mhm.
and I'm like, Chris may surpass the 500 mark.
I don't know, like at
Oh,
this rate, possibly, but yeah, anybody that wants to check those out, I'd be more than happy to have you guys come on there, and because they are live streams, they're not pre-recorded, so if you guys want to come in there and chat with me, like how you guys are here tonight and on Dana's stream, I do that same thing. It's just me, so I don't, so you're just gonna have to hear me talk. I'm not gonna have anybody on there with me, but
but Chris
but
is very entertaining and very knowledgeable.
yeah,
So,
I'll make it worth your while.
Candace says it's a light show outside. I guess at y'all's house. She says there's
Oh,
heat
I haven't
lightning
looked
everywhere.
outside. My windows are completely covered up, so I can't.
Uh,
I wouldn't know.
I don't think it's heat lightning around here, but it's definitely hot enough to do so if it wanted to. But so I did want to mention that Batman said that he also watched Annie Lee's Meat Pies for the first time the other day. Now that Annie Lee's Meat Pies is an experience in and of itself. And
Yeah,
he says Michael Berryman was cracking me up. Larry, stupid. I
yeah.
do
I've
remember
I
Michael
actually
Berryman from that.
I bought that movie like randomly at a comic store years ago on VHS for $1,
Oh
and
wow.
I was like, I didn't know what it was. I was just intrigued by the name of it, and I seen that Pat Morita was in it that played Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid, and I was like, what the hell is this? And it's very bizarre, but it's a fun watch.
It definitely is. Um, so we got about 5, 6 more minutes before 10. Um, Chris has already kind of talked about what he's got coming up on
Mhm.
his channel. And I've kind of talked earlier about what's going to be coming up this week or for the rest of the week. Um, but Chris, are there any final thoughts on horror conventions that you like? Any words of wisdom for somebody
Um,
that might be thinking of going to one that maybe hasn't went to one, or
well, if you've never went to a convention before and you're thinking about it, um, I highly support your will and your want to go to these shows because there's going to be a lot of people out there that's going to try to scare you away. That's going to say, well, these there's you're going to wait in long lines to get into the thing, and then once you get in, you got to wait in more lines, and you'll be paying a lot of money, and you know, yeah, that's all true, but it's all about how you make the experience for yourself. I can say if you do plan on meeting people, if you do plan on buying stuff, just don't wait and decide you're going to go like a month before or something. You want to be selective. Like I said, there's a lot of conventions to choose from out there, and what I suggest is just, stick to somewhere that's kind of semi local to you. Don't travel for one of these because, there's a lot of people that travel like hours and hours to go to these conventions, and then they end up, you'll see like they're, saying they had a terrible time, terrible experience, blah, blah, blah.
terrible
So,
hotel stays? They stayed in the wrong hotel, and
but that's not for everybody. Not everybody's going to have that same experience. You got to go and experience it for yourself, do something on your own, and just kind of, and then, evaluate it after the fact.
right.
But like I said, try to like pick one really want to go to, and just know months in advance so you can save money. Because I said, while these are really fun, they're very expensive. But and so if you want, especially if you want to buy autographs or photo ops or a lot of merchandise from vendors, you know, I but I always kind of set a budget for
That's
myself.
what I was gonna say. You got to have what I would call a cutoff point. You can't just keep going,
Yeah.
or
If you
you'll have a zero in your bank account if you do that.
What I usually do, I know, several months ahead of time what show I'm wanting to go to. So I try to focus on that show, and I try to set a budget myself no more than like, $400 or $500. And then that's for everything. That's not just autographs and merch. That's hotel, that's gas, that's food, that's everything. I try to and sometimes I'm not gonna lie, I have went over that budget, and because I just kind of got greedy, I guess I could say, because there
Got
was
carried away a
thing,
little bit.
things I wanted more. I was like, well, I'll be all right. And then, but unless 100% sure you're going to be all right after that convention financially,
Yeah, because
I'm
when you get
telling you,
back home, reality's gonna sit back.
from experience, don't risk it. So, but unless 100%, that you can financially, cover yourself after that convention. But yeah, like definitely just go in, have fun, just go in, knowing that there's going to be other people there too, having this, same experience as you possibly for the first time. And, and don't be afraid to talk to people. Don't be afraid to start up conversations with random people, because I've done that so many times and I've made some of the best friends,
Oh yeah.
of my life at these shows. So, definitely you just go into um these shows being optimistic. Because if you don't go into it being optimistic, you're going to make yourself miserable by going into it with anxiety and stress and like thinking that it's not going to go the way you're hoping it to be. You can't go into a convention with that mindset, or you're going to make yourself have a bad time just by being that way
Right. And
right off the bat.
I just like to add, you don't want to pre-base your experience if you've
From
never been on what somebody else has, like what Chris was saying. Don't base it on what other people have
exactly.
experienced, because just because they had a lousy time does not guarantee that you're going to go there and have a lousy time. You may have a wonderful time.
And same thing with celebrities too. Like just because if you've heard horror stories, from
I
other
did about
people,
Tom Savini, and he was fine when I met him.
same, same here. Like and there's been so many people, and it's not just one or two people that have said they've had a bad experience with Tom Savini. There's multiple people out there.
Right.
But I even me knowing hearing those stories before I ever met Tom Savini, I still went in and I met him. And I've met him like 2 or 3 times now, and I've never had an issue with him.
Right.
So, like, everybody's different, so just you gotta take what happens and the stories that people tell, with a grain of salt, because just because that happened to them or they had that type of experience doesn't mean that you're gonna have that same exact experience.
Hmm. Hey, Brian. I hadn't seen you in here for a while. Brian always brings me a digital rose when he comes in here, so
That's
I
nice.
like that. I love roses. Roses are my favorite flower in the whole world. But but it is now right at 10 o'clock, and I want to first of all thank Chris for being on here with me for the first ever episode of Horror Fandom. It's a way of life, and we talked, all things horror conventions, the good, the bad, the ugly, what our thoughts on different things, and I thought the show went even better than I imagined it could go, and I credit a lot of that with Chris because I always like having Chris on here because he's my friend and he's my brother, you know, and we get along so well. Me and him and Candace get along like you wouldn't believe. We get along like a house on fire, basically, or that's how I feel about it anyway. Um,
A very different analogy.
but I don't want to think about anybody's house being on fire though. Um, but also, Chris is super, super knowledgeable about he was talking about basically a little bit earlier, he was talking about he's into a lot of different aspects of pop culture, not just movies, but music and comic books and
Okay.
figures, video games, just all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, so it
I'm what you would
behooves
I'm what you would call a smorgasbord fan.
well, he's a buffet table of
Yeah.
different things that he's a fan of. But that is good because when you like a bunch of different things, you're never going to run out of things to enjoy. Like for instance, if heaven forbid they stopped having horror conventions tomorrow, or people stopped directing horror films, Chris would still have stuff that he could enjoy. He wouldn't just be sitting in a corner crying his eyes out because they took away the horror conventions, they took away the horror movies. So that's all part of being a well rounded individual. You're not just into just one thing. And if it all of a sudden went away, you're like, oh, now what do I do? What do I do now? What do I enjoy now? But I love having Chris on here because it's a lot of fun to talk to my friend, and it's also good to be able to bounce things off of each other. And because he's so knowledgeable, the stuff that I might leave out or may not even be aware of, Chris picks up the slack there, and it is more cohesive and runs more even. I think when I have somebody of the caliber of knowledge that Chris has. So it's very important to me that that I give Chris his time when he's on here. That's why I try to train myself to shut my mouth a little bit as much as I can. Let
You're
Chris
fine,
talk.
man.
Um, so I also want to thank everybody that was in the chat with us tonight. And even if you weren't in the chat, if you were just watching, because I saw, basically once we got going, 7 to 10 people in here at all points in time. So that's pretty good. Um, but anybody that didn't get to watch us live, you can watch this on the replay. I want to thank those of you that will watch it on the replay as well. And Brian, you say you've been dealing with a lot of health and financial issues. Well, those are two things that are I don't want to say near and dear to my heart because those ain't good things, but I think we've all experienced those unless we're just in excellent health, and I don't know too many people in just completely excellent health, or people that are just super rich won't have any financial problems. But oh my gosh, Brian, I am so sorry to hear about your brother as well. Oh, that is heartbreaking. Um,
Hate that, man. Sorry for your
yeah,
condolences.
um, yeah, I know you'll be in my thoughts and prayers, Brian, as you're dealing with this stuff. Thank you, Batman, for saying it was a great stream. Batman's a big supporter of my stuff as well. But I guess, unless Chris, is there anything else that you want to bring up before we tie everything up with a nice, neat bow?
Well, I was thinking, Dana, if you wanted to, whenever you want to do another one of these, it doesn't have to be the next episode or anything. But just whenever you want to do this, but I just thought of like, the whole in horror fandom, we like to collect things.
Yep.
There's a lot of collectibles from movies to toys to whatever. So maybe one time for this series, you'd like to do like a horror collectibles.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, and maybe me and Chris can show some of our stuff off, and maybe if some of you guys and gals want to come on here with us and show some stuff,
that would be a lot of fun.
Chris can come on here with us and show some of her stuff too. I would love that. And I don't know that I'll do these every Tuesday, but Tuesdays was the day or the night rather, that I was planning on doing them. So usually I try to do things at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So, and I think that when Chris is able to be on here with me, that allows him to have time to get off from work, especially
hmm
if I'm doing it through the week. So, yeah, I think that'd be an awesome idea the next time I do one of these, to do one on collectibles.
Yeah, that would be really fun, I think.
Mm, I think so too. And it would give me an excuse to get all my hard collectibles and show them
Yeah.
off as if I need an excuse. But um, Brian does say, I'm sure you guys know, but just in case, Asylum has a YouTube channel where they have 24/7 live streams of their movies, plus many of their movies available to watch. Um, and he also says, I've been making and trying to sell a lot of skulls from resin, any colors you can imagine.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that is really, really cool. But I guess before it gets any later, me and Chris should call it a night. I'm sure Chris has got a few things he's got to do before
Not
he
really, but
goes.
probably just be watching movies.
Well, that's good too. I'll probably watch a movie or so before I hit the hay officially. But again, thank you to everybody that showed up and hung out with us tonight as we talked about horror conventions. And me and Chris, as always, are off like a couple of dirty shirts. Our shirts ain't dirty, I promise. They're clean. But we're off like a couple of them. And I want to remind everybody, as I always do, before we do officially get off here for the night, to be kind to one another and blaze that trail and support your horror fans out there. Even if you're not a horror fan, support them. Don't, please
Right.
don't put them down and make them feel weird for, liking horror. I just wanted to add that. But anyway, we're out of here for the night. Well, we'll see everybody next time, and y'all have a great rest of your Tuesday night. Watch a lot of movies or do whatever makes you happy. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Everybody.